Is it possible that one of the best ranged weapon users in D&D right now is an artificer? Not only can they do great damage, but they bring a ton of utility, support, area of effect damage, and just general versatility. And I might not be talking about the subclass that you think I'm talking about. You ready to build one with me? Welcome to D4. Hey everybody, so here at D4 every week I take a deep dive into character builds for my favorite role-playing games. I like to crunch numbers about them, I like to theory craft about them, not so that I can tell you the right or the best way to play a character, but to explore one potential way for building a character in the hopes of creating something that's both really powerful but also really fun to play. So if you too enjoy creating characters for your favorite role-playing games, or if you're just looking for tips or ideas on how to build something that you're thinking about playing, or if you just like theory crafting, then welcome home. And I'm really glad you're here. So thanks for watching. My name's Colby. Right, so the new, I'll put it in air quotes, Artificer has been out for a little over a month at the time of this recording. I put it in air quotes because for me, and I think a lot of people that I've seen talking about it online especially, there just weren't a ton of changes to what we had previously, from Tasha's Cauldron of Everything 5 years ago to what we got. Now, sure, we got a new subclass, and yes, we make magic items now instead of infuse mundane items, and sure, there were a few little tweaks to some class and subclass features. Armor's got a dreadnought option, right? But by and large, generally speaking, most of what we see here in the new Eberron book for Artificers is mostly the same. Take the Artillerist, for example. When you compare the new subclass to the old one, it's almost exactly the same. The spell list is identical. The Eldritch Cannon is pretty much identical. Explosive Cannon at level 9, right, got a couple of minor buffs. And at level 15, Fortified Position is identical. And this is pretty symptomatic of most of the subclasses. I would actually venture to say that the biggest change to the Artillerist has to do with martial ranged weapons. First of all, they get proficiency with martial ranged weapons now, which they didn't used to have. And then there's this little tweak made to the level 5 feature Arcane Firearm that really caught my eye, and I've been pondering on it ever since release. Arcane Firearm lets you essentially carve a sigil into something and make it your spellcasting focus, right? And then says that when we cast an Artificer spell through that focus, we get an extra D8 of damage to one roll of the spell. But here's the little tweak. It used to only allow you to do this to a rod, staff, or wand, but in the new Eberron book, it's been changed to let you do this to a rod, staff, wand, or martial ranged weapon. And I can't get that out of my head. Why this change? Is it because they want you to not have to worry about having to juggle between your ranged weapon should you decide to use one and your spellcasting focus? Maybe. I mean, any ranged weapon should, even two-handed ones, I think, let you not have to worry about, like holding onto your crossbow with one hand and like gripping your wand or your crystal or something like that when need be, right? Maybe it's simply to allow you to use a hand crossbow and a shield and still make spell attacks, thanks to the repeating shot magic item, right? Maybe it was just because they thought it was cooler to have your weapon also be your spell focus. It was just a flavor thing. But me being me, I can't help but look for ways that we might be able to get a little more mechanical power from this change. Because I mean, at first glance, when you look at the Artillerist, I think you kind of go, okay, area of effect damage dealer with some support capabilities, right? The Flamethrower seems like it's clearly the better damage option for the Eldritch Cannon that they get, and their spell list, Fireball in particular, right, seems to lead us in that direction. Even the name of the subclass evokes like a ranged barrager, right? Who's dropping area of effect bombs rather than trying to snipe a single enemy. That said, with this martial ranged weapon change and emphasis, I can think of a couple of different ways we might potentially be able to make a pretty potent single target damage dealer with help from a little multi-classing especially. One of those ways works, no question, and is both rules as intended and rules as written, I think, that I will plan on building around. But there's a potential reading here that might be a little more fringe especially as far as rules as intended, that I won't necessarily try to build around, but that I want to explore and discuss with you all nevertheless, because I think there's some fantastic fun and power we could get out of it if it works like I think it might work. I know that's all a little vague and elusive. Sorry to be a tease. I'm trying to get you to keep watching. Let's just jump into the thing here, shall we? I proudly present D&D Build number 243, the Artillerist 2.0, the Swiss Army Crossbow, Heavy Ordnance, the Bazooka, Why I Stopped Worrying and Learned to Love the Bow, Tom Bombokill. Thanks as always to all of the great suggestions from the Discord users. I gotta give it, I think, to No Race Like Gnome again and go with the Artillerist Bowcaster. Is that too niche? We're all Star Wars fans, right? It's just a great illusion and like really on point for the character and like what we do and who we are. So anyways, huge thanks to my good friend Randall Hampton for the fantastic artwork that he put together for the build this week. He does this almost every week. He's so good. If you'd be interested in following him to check out the other stuff that he has created, or to even potentially try and commission him to create some art for your character or even your entire party, I will put links in the video description as always on how to do so. But before we go any further, I am so happy to have World Anvil back as a sponsor today. I have a new neighbor who's become a friend and he's newly into D&D and he wants to try DMing for the first time. And I, being the kind and benevolent man that I am, have generously offered to let him DM a campaign for me and some other neighbor friends. It's so kind. It's such a sacrifice. But on Saturday, I'm going to show him World Anvil, and it's going to make his life so much easier, especially as someone who's jumping into DMing for the first time, right? Because, yeah, in case you didn't know, World Anvil is the best world building, writing, and game mastering software ever. They have 25 world building article templates to make it easier than ever to build and flesh out your world in a way that's super accessible for your players. It is fantastic for creating wiki-style presentations of your world and your writing, including my favorite feature, their interactive maps that can turn maps that you make into interactive, clickable pages. And then there's the Chronicles feature, which can combine those maps with custom timelines. But of course, World Anvil isn't just for GMs, it's for players too. It's got the most extensive character management tool you can find. We're talking character sheets, journals, inventory management, spell books, everything that a character needs to track and manage their character and their story, and it's compatible with over 45 different TTRPG systems. Not just D&D, but Pathfinder, Daggerheart. Anvil isn't just for GMs and players of RPGs, it's even for writers. Yeah, if you just want to use it as a writing tool to help you with your novel or your series of short stories, you'll find all the best tools in World Anvil to help you write, organize, and even present and publish rich settings with complex characters. You can write, world build, and manage your story all with a single platform. So if you haven't yet, please stop procrastinating. Go check out World Anvil. You can sign up for a free account and just test it out. When you do, I would appreciate it if you would use the link that I've put in the video description and in the pinned comment so that they know I sent you. And as always, if you decide to get a yearly subscription, which would be a great investment, if you use the code D4 at checkout, you will save an incredible 51%. That's like getting 2 for the price of 1. Get one for you, get one for a friend, and still pay less than full price for a single subscription, right? What a deal. So humongous thank you to World Anvil. I am so grateful for your support, and I love your stuff. Okay, let's jump into the build. At level 1, for our starting class, we are just going Artificer because, yeah, even if you're multi-classing, like I say, if you're planning on getting Artificer levels, there's little reason not to start out as an Artificer, since that gives us medium armor and shield proficiencies, as well as Constitution saving throw proficiency, which is so important for concentrating spellcasters. As for our species, I'm going to suggest a few. I'll probably go Goliath here, as I so often do, and take the Frost Giant ancestry for a little extra damage on an attack, proficiency bonus times per day. But also, important for this build, which I see as kind of a ranged damage dealer, but also support controller hybrid. When you do this extra bit of cold damage, you also automatically slow your target by 10 feet until the start of our next turn, which, as we will see, could really help us keep at least one enemy out of the fight with some regularity. But if you're sick of Goliaths, there are others that would work great here. I think a Dragonborn is a really great pick for those wanting to lean into like the multi-target damage aspect of what artillerists can do, thanks to their breath weapon, right? Shifters are a lot of fun. I think on this build, I'd want to take the swift stride shifting option for extra move speed and to let you move 10 feet as a reaction when an enemy ends their turn next to you without provoking opportunity attacks. That's especially nice for ranged characters who are both trying to stay safe and who want to avoid having disadvantage on their ranged attacks thanks to an enemy being next to them, right? But I think the most powerful species for this build would actually be the Lotus Den Halfling. If my table allowed content from the Wildemount book, the Critical Role book, right, this would probably be my first pick, thanks largely to the spells that they get access to, which we will discuss later. It would actually change this build significantly if I could go Lotus Den Halfling. That said, my sense is that a large portion of you can't just play with Wildemount content unless you're playing in that setting, right? And I also don't love that they can only cast the spells they get access to once per long rest without any, or using spell slots if you've got them verbiage, right? So yeah, take all that into consideration. I'm not going to assume that we can go Lotus Den, but if you can, consider it. As for our background, I am going to say, as always, take an old one and make it your own or customize one if you can, but if not, Merchant will work just fine for us as it gives us the ability score increases that we want and the origin feat that we want, which is lucky, as it so often is. Not a mandatory feat by any means. Go for Musician or Alert or Tough or anything else you might want if you'd rather. I just really love on-demand advantage for both attacks and for saves, proficiency bonus times per day. For our ability scores, I'm assuming we go the point buy method as always and say, let's start with a 15 intelligence, take a +2 there, a 13 constitution and a +1 there, 14 dexterity and a 13 wisdom. Now, that wisdom score is for multiclassing, but we won't actually be needing it until like tier 2 of play. And even then, some of you might not love what I plan on doing with that multiclassing, so feel free to bump your constitution higher instead if you really want. You'll be able to decide when we get there. For starting equipment, I'm going to say let's just grab some scale mail and a light crossbow for now, since we won't have ranged martial weapon proficiency until we get our subclass, right? As an artificer at level 1 though, we get Tinker's Magic first up, which teaches us the mending cantrip, important for this build especially, and then lets us use an action to basically create a piece of adventuring gear, intelligence modifier times per day. Handy if we need something. And then there's Artificer spells, right? And I'd want Cure Wounds for a nice heal. Jump is good for all-round utility and movement. And high movement will be pretty important on this build, I think. More on that later. And then maybe consider Fairy Fire for concentration at these early levels at least, potentially letting everyone have advantage on attacks against enemies who failed their dexterity save against it. But as for cantrips, we only get 2. In addition to the mending that we got for free, right? So I'd be taking Thorn Whip to make an attack and potentially pull an enemy 15 feet towards us. Forced movement is going to be our jam on this build. And then most importantly, above all for the build today, True Strike. Yeah, I know, I use this spell a lot in 5.5 builds. It's really good. It lets us make a weapon attack as part of the casting of the spell, but using our spellcasting modifier to hit and damage. It deals radiant damage and then does extra damage too once we hit level 5. So cast it and make a ranged crossbow attack. It doesn't limit you to melee attacks like the blade cantrips do, right? And that's pretty decent damage now and is going to have some nice scaling too as we go. At level 2, we get Replicate Magic Item, which replaces the old infusions, right? But works very similarly in that it lets us learn 4 magic item plans from a nice list of options and says that after a long rest, we can create up to 2 magic items from our known plans. We get more later. And I think for now, the ones that I would go with would be, first up, the Repeating Shot item. This basically makes a magic +1 ranged weapon that ignores the loading property, meaning we can fire it more than once per turn if we gain the ability to do so. And also that it magically produces its own ammunition when fired, which is super handy, keeping us from having to worry about tracking that, but more importantly, perhaps keeping it from needing a free hand to load it. Meaning that, yeah, once you get proficiency with martial ranged weapons, at least, you could make this a Repeating Shot hand crossbow and equip a shield to increase your armor class by 2 or more, which is pretty awesome. For now, we'll just make ourselves a repeating light crossbow, right? As for the second item, there are plenty we could go with, including any uncommon magic item that isn't a potion scroll or cursed. So sure, spell rot tattoos, etc., but I think what I'd probably do, at least at level 2 here, would be to make myself some half-plate armor of gleaming or smoldering half-plate. I got a lot of comments about this in my Guardian 2.0 tank build a few weeks ago, right up there, and yeah, it's a great suggestion, right? Half-plate is 750 gold. At this level, you probably can't afford that. But you can make it as one of your magic items. Just make it an uncommon magic armor and enjoy some fun flavor, like it can't get dirty or it emits smoke. Ooh, look at you, Smolder. Speaking of smoking hot people, let me give a quick shout out to my channel members and patrons. Oh, thank you guys so much for your support. I couldn't do what I do without you, and so you're awesome, and thank you. And if you're not a channel member or a patron, I'd love it if you'd consider becoming one. If you look in the video description, there's links to my YouTube member page or Patreon page, and it'll tell you about the perks that you can get if you sign up. And I give all of my perks to all of my members as long as they sign up at the silver level or higher, and just ask that you pay what you think it's worth and what you feel you can afford. Those perks include access to the library of write-ups that I create for each of my builds to help you recreate it yourself a little more easily, access to the community Discord server, and access to the live monthly Q&A hangout sessions that we have. So yeah, if you don't think that that's worth it or that you can't afford it, that's okay. Just being here and watching and liking and subscribing and all of the usual things are also great ways to support, so thanks. At level 3, we get our subclass, and yes, we're going Artillerist, as we've said. Since it's the first time that I'm using this new version of the subclass, let's read the flavor text on the Artillerist that we get from Wizards of the Coast here, shall we? An Artillerist specializes in using magic to hurl energy, projectiles, and explosions on a battlefield. Okay. That's just the first sentence from the flavor text from Tasha's Cauldron of Everything, but you left out all the rest of the juicy flavor that you had before. Why? Why would you do that? I don't know, but anyways. As an Artillerist, we get Tools of the Trade here, first up, which gives us proficiency in Woodcarver's tools, and as we mentioned, in martial ranged weapons as well, so I will assume that we've got Heavy Crossbow now. Just, as soon as you get a long rest, you can make a new magic item. And yeah, I guess I should mention, this could be a pistol or a musket instead if you want, and if firearms are allowed at your table. Hard to imagine they wouldn't be if artificers are allowed, but maybe not. The crossbow, however, will be important for this build, as we will get into later, but not for a few more levels. This also lets us craft magic wands in half the time as normal, which is potentially pretty cool and useful. Especially if you've got a thief rogue in the party, right? We also get Artillerist spells here, which haven't changed, like I said, but are bangers, pun intended. Thunder Wave for some small AoE damage, and above all, Shield for some incredible defensive power. But then there's the main feature of the subclass, really, the Eldritch Cannon. This lets us, with an action, create a small, or better yet, I think, a tiny little cannon. We can determine its appearance, whether it has legs or wheels, and even whether we carry it or not. I think I probably usually would be carrying it, more on that later, but it has a respectable 18 AC and a number of hit points equal to 5 times our Artificer level, which is some decent scaling. And we can heal it 2d6 hit points with the Mending spell, right? It's immune to poison and psychic damage. Interestingly, it used to say that for saves and ability checks, you would just assume that their stats were like +0, right? But that verbiage is gone. I assume it still applies, but I'm not sure why they cut it. Anyways, as long as we are within 60 feet of it, on our turn, we can use our bonus action to move it up to 15 feet if we want and do one of 3 things. And this actually is a nice buff that I should have mentioned at the beginning. It used to be that we'd decide what kind of cannon it was when we created it, right? And then it could only do that one thing. Now it can do any of the 3 things we want on our turn, switching it up if need be. And that's for sure some really nice added versatility, no question. Anyways, the options are Flamethrower to shoot out a 15-foot cone of fire that requires a dexterity save or does 2d8 fire damage, half on a save. Protector to give a 1d8 plus intelligence modifier in temporary hit points to those we choose in a 10-foot emanation, or what I think most people consider to be the weakest option, Force Ballista, which does 2d8 force damage to a single enemy within 120 feet, it's a nice range, and pushes the enemy 5 feet. Why do I say people think this is the weakest? Simply because it's the same amount of damage as the flamethrower, but the flamethrower can potentially harm multiple enemies and does half damage on a save, right? So it's guaranteed damage unless they're immune to fire. Nevertheless, we are largely going to be building around that Force Ballista attack today, and you'll see why later. But I love having both the Protector and Flamethrower options too, right, when we need them. Oh, also, remember that the cannon only lasts for an hour, and we can only make one per day for free, but we can spend a spell slot to make one otherwise. I really wish they would have adjusted this. An hour is just a little clunky. Like, it might be active when combat breaks out, if you're anticipating getting into a fight soon, or if you're in a dungeon crawl, but you don't always know, right? And unless you're in like a dungeon crawl situation, you might have hours between combat encounters, yeah? Ugh, I hate short timers on things like this, but whatever. I will assume that it's active when I crunch numbers. If it's not, it does significantly slow down our combat, no question. At level 4, we get a general feat, and I think we got to take the new Spellfire Adept feat. This is new as per the Faerun book, right? And it's amazing. It raises our, for us, intelligence by 1 to 18, and then says that once per turn, when we cast a spell that deals radiant damage, we can expend up to 2 hit dice and add their total to the damage of the spell. And guess what spell we regularly cast that does radiant damage? That's right, True Strike. It also lets our spells ignore resistance to radiant damage too, and yeah, I totally would have taken this feat on the Doomscroller Rogue that I built last week if I wasn't limiting myself to 5.5 player handbook only stuff for that build and for that single class build series, right? But today we have no such restrictions, obviously, so yay, because I love this feat. I think it's my favorite feat from the Faerun book, maybe. Coldcaster is good too. And so is Fairy Trickster, for the right build, anyways. And sure, it comes at a cost. It's gonna be harder to heal during a short rest if we're blowing all of our hit dice on damage, but when have I ever worried about sacrificing survivability in the name of more damage? When I'm not building a tank anyways. Never. Almost never. And it won't stop me today either. Feel free to go with another half feat here instead if you prefer, especially if you're at a table where the DM really tests you and maybe has you going through lots of encounters per long and short rest. But for us, caution to the wind, we'll take that extra 2d8 once per turn until our hit dice are toast. YOLO. At level 5, we get the Arcane Firearm feature, which, yeah, is for me the most interesting artillerist feature now. So, as we've said, this lets us inscribe a sigil into a Rodstaff wand or now martial ranged weapon and make it our arcane firearm, which we can use as a spellcasting focus for our artificer spells. And when we cast a spell through the firearm, that's a direct quote, and I think that verbiage is important, we can add a d8 of bonus damage to one of the spell's damage rolls. So yes, this means that if we cast an AoE spell through it, right? Since we only roll once and apply the same damage to all enemies hit, it would add a d8 to the damage for every enemy, which is cool. Also, if we're casting True Strike through the firearm, you get to make a weapon attack with True Strike, right? Using intelligence to hit and damage, plus an extra d6, now that we're level 5, right? Plus an extra d8 thanks to the firearm bonus. And that's what we'll be doing when I crunch numbers. But here's what I keep thinking about. If we're casting a spell using a heavy crossbow, are we essentially making attacks with that crossbow? Even if it's a spell attack? Why would that matter? Some of you are probably thinking what I'm thinking, but we'll get into it a little bit more next level. For now, let's just talk about the second level spells that we get here. There are a ton that I'd love to have. Artillerists get Scorching Ray and Shatter for free, both pretty on point thematically, but beyond that, I'd want Aid to heal and increase the max hit points of 3 party members. Blur is a nice defensive move to give enemies disadvantage on attacks against us at the cost of our concentration. Dragon's Breath is another one worth considering spending our concentration on if we wanted to go the AoE route especially. That's area of effect, by the way. I keep saying that maybe not everybody knows. This plus flamethrower makes for some pretty solid AoE damage to like 2 or 3 nearby enemies, right? There are 2 that I think are really must-haves here. First, Homunculus Servant. Used to be an infusion, now it's a ritual spell that creates another little pet for us that goes right after us and requires no action or bonus action on our part to command. It's a little squishier than our cannon, it's 13 armor class and 15 hit points at this level, but it does have a fly speed of 30 feet to help it stay alive, as well as poison immunity, a saving throw bump, and even evasion, which is nice. That plus a +4 to its dexterity saves now should help it survive at least one fireball, right? It seems like a lot of times when little pets get taken out like this, it's due to like area of effect things. So yeah, evasion, kind of a big deal here. Anyways, it can make a single attack for a d6 plus 2 damage using our spell attack modifier to hit. It's not a ton, but it's free damage if it can stay alive. More on that in a minute. The second must-have spell, though, here I think is Web. This is a solid control spell for level 2, covering a 20-foot cube in webs that make the area difficult terrain and cause enemies to potentially be restrained. They have to make a dexterity save when they first enter the area or start their turn there, and if they fail, they're restrained until they use their action to make a successful athletics check against our spell DC. And restrained is awesome, right? It's going to give attacks against them advantage, it's going to keep them from moving, it's going to make their attacks have disadvantage, but even if they succeed on that save, if they're in the middle of the web, they will be slowed as they try to get out. Coupled with a frost giant Goliath slow, right? They might not even be able to get out of the area on their turn. Maybe unless they dash, or maybe they'll just escape, but it'll still be too far away to do anything effective. It's a solid play, especially if we have a way to continually push enemies into it, right? So, okay. Now that we have what I think are the most important features from Artificer and Artillerist, I actually want to do a little multi-classing. That might seem a little crazy to some of you. We're just about to get the more powerful level 6 magic item plans, and there's a lot of other nice stuff in Artificer and Artillerist in the near and mid and even long-term future, right? I mean, who would multi-class before Artificer 11 in this economy, right? But if we really want to get the most single target damage out of the Artillerist that we can, and that's what I'm going for today, as well as some additional support and control potential, then yeah, we're going to dabble in some other classes. First up, surprising no one, Fighter. So yeah, at level 6, Fighter 1. And that's for 2 main reasons. One, I want a fighting style, namely archery. This gives us, and I quote, a +2 bonus to attack rolls you make with ranged weapons. I think the verbiage, again, is important there. This will be nice to help us ensure that our True Strike attack lands, among other things, potentially. But then, the second reason I want Fighter here is for weapon masteries. Fighters get 3, and I would say grab like the musket or longbow here for slow. Now we could really keep enemies in our web, potentially. The hand crossbow or pistol for Vex to keep a potential advantage chain going if you wanted to have a shield equipped especially. But most importantly, yeah, the heavy crossbow for push, which would let us push a creature 10 feet away from us if they are large or smaller, no saving throw. This would potentially give us 15 feet of forced movement between the crossbow and the force ballista from our cannon, right? And that makes me feel a lot better about being able to keep at least one enemy, if not more, inside of our webs. Especially since we can move 35 feet as a Goliath, maybe more if we've got jump or long strider going, right? To kind of move around and like get an enemy between us and the web so that we can push them into it. And also, if our cannon is just like perched on our shoulder all the time, they can jump off and get 15 feet further if need be, maybe to get around the back of the web or something to shove someone in or shove them a little further back into the middle of the webs or something, right? It's a fun and potent play, and I really like it. But here's the real question I have with all of this that I've been hinting at for 30 minutes now? So, okay, get comfy. I'm about to get a little bit out there. We have established that, thanks to the arcane firearm feature that artillerists get, our crossbow is our spell focus, and that when we make a spell attack, we are essentially attacking through or with our crossbow, yeah? Wouldn't that potentially mean, then, that a spell we cast, as long as it was an attack spell, could benefit from the archery fighting style and, like, the push weapon mastery? Hear me out. The archery fighting style says that we get a +2 bonus to attack rolls that we make with ranged weapons. It definitely does not say that those attacks can't be spell attacks. Maybe it's implied, but just stay with me for a sec. Similarly, the push weapon mastery says, quote, if you hit a creature with this weapon, you can push the creature. By contrast, look at the cleave weapon mastery. Quote, if you hit a creature with a melee attack roll using this weapon, right? If we're making a spell attack through our crossbow as our arcane firearm, it seems to me like there's at least an argument to be made that it could benefit from fighting styles and some weapon masteries. Maybe not. Maybe cleave only specifies a melee attack roll because only melee weapons have the cleave mastery. It's probably the intent of Wizards of the Coast here for these things only to work if you make a weapon attack specifically and not any attack, even a spell attack, using the weapon as your arcane firearm in our case. But I don't know. Artificers, I would argue, are a little bit underpowered generally. I think most, not all of you, I know, would agree. Would it really be so broken to let me apply a +2 to hit and a little push to my spell attacks made through my arcane firearm that's also my crossbow? For most spell attacks, probably not. Then again, imagine if we used it on Scorching Ray. That's where I really wanted to go with this build. +2 to hit on all 3 rays and 10 feet of pushing on every single one. 30 feet of forced movement. And way more if we start upcasting. Oh, that would have been so fun. And come on, so cool. And hey, maybe it works, rules as written, or regardless, maybe your DM would allow it. I'm not going to assume that they will for the build today, but fortunately, it should have no problem working with True Strike, since you're making an actual weapon attack as part of the casting of that spell too, right? But still, just think what could have been. Anyways, moving on, we also get Second Wind at Fighter 1, right? This just lets us heal ourselves for a D10 plus our fighter level twice per day, recovering 1 use on a short rest as a bonus action. And I really appreciate the extra heals, especially since I'm planning on burning all of my hit dice for damage. Come on, we can get temporary hit points from our cannon. We've got Cure Wounds. We'll be fine. Okay, at level 6, it is time for our first damage report. Here's what I would hope combat would look like for us, ideally. On round 1, we would throw down web with our action, trying to get as many enemies snared in there as possible, and with our bonus action, have our cannon make a force ballista attack against one of them for 2d8 damage. Maybe, target somebody who can be nudged into the web who's like just outside of it. Or maybe one we can just shove a little bit deeper, right? Just be careful not to use the flamethrower attack on them here since, webs are flammable. And while sure you'd get a little more damage out of it by lighting your enemies on fire, I'd rather restrain them if I could. I'll also assume the homunculus is getting an attack off for a little d6 plus 2 potentially. Do I assume this every round? I think I will. First off, it's a teeny amount of damage really, and sure, they're fairly squishy, but they do have flight, and unlike most pets that can often get taken out by AoE attacks, evasion. So I think they've got a decent chance of staying alive, honestly. This creature is a little buzzing fly compared to you and your allies. I think it would be foolish of enemies to spend action economy on trying to take them out. And if they do, it is absolutely a net gain for your party. If the homunculus was hitting a lot harder and didn't have evasion, I might not include them in the damage report, but let's throw it in there. Anyways, on subsequent rounds, we'd simply make a True Strike attack with our action, and if we hit, we'd do a d10 of damage from our crossbow, a d6 from True Strike, another d6 from our Frost Giant Ancestry to further slow them in the quagmire, a d8 from our Arcane Firearm, 2d8 more from Spellfire Adept, or like 1d10 and 1d8 the first time, I guess, since we've got a single fighter level hit die, right? If we wanted to live dangerously, +4 from our intelligence, +1 from being a repeating shot weapon. That is a solid attack. And since casting True Strike causes us to make a weapon attack, we'd get a +2 to hit, thanks to the archery fighting style, +1 more from being a repeating shot weapon, right? And be able to push the enemy 10 feet, hopefully, into or back into or deeper into our web. And then still, force ballista attack, homunculus attack, right? Rinse and repeat. And sure, for ease of number crunching, between the potential for our enemies to be restrained by our web, which remember gives attacks against them advantage, right? And our luck points, I'm just going to assume that we have advantage on all of our attacks. Your mileage may vary slightly, but it's too big of a pain to try and calculate like advantage 80% of the time or something. And I don't know what that number would be anyways, so bump this down a skosh in your head if it makes you feel better, but averaged over 4 rounds. Against enemies with a 10 AC, we would do 41 damage per round here, and against a 15 AC, it would be 39 DPR. And compared to other DPR builds that I've done to date at this level, you know what? That's solid. I'd call it middle of the pack, maybe even upper end of the middle of the pack. And combined with your healing, control, utility, and survivability, you might not be like topping the damage charts, but this character is fantastic in battle. At least for 1 combat encounter per day, right? We are using up a lot of resources here, but definitely someone I'd love to play as or have as an ally. So let's see where we go from here. So at level 7, we're taking druid levels. What the crap? I know. It feels a little weird. This is definitely something I've never done before, I don't think. It kind of feels like a challenge from Kelly and Monty back when they were doing their old multi-classing series and constantly challenging me to pair 2 classes together that didn't feel like a great fit on the surface. Those were fun times. But anyways, Druid and Artificer. Why is your Tinker that's all into clockwork steampunk? I know it doesn't have to be steampunk, but it totally is. Why are they suddenly interested in the natural world? I don't know, you tell me. Maybe they've seen the devastation that technology can wreak on an environment. Maybe the place they grew up in was devastated by a hyper-focus on industry at the expense of the natural world, and they've had a change of heart or an epiphany. And maybe they've been trying to practice a more sustainable techno-magic all along, and this is just a manifestation of their motives. I'd love to hear how you might work this into your character's story in the comments. But whatever your reasons, that's what we are doing here. So as a Druid 1, we learn Druidic, first of all, that little special coded language that Druids can use to leave messages for one another in the forest. And then we get a Primal Order, and I would choose the Magician option here since we don't need medium armor or martial weapons, and this would just let us learn an extra Druid cantrip and let us add our Wisdom bonus to our Arcana or Nature checks. Not bad. And then we learn Druid spells, right? And I would want to grab Guidance for a D4 bump to ability checks, and then Goodberry and Healing Word for some additional healing power and utility, even with Goodberry. And maybe even Entangle for a poor man's web spell, right? It's similar but not quite as good as web, especially since the DC would be based on our wisdom modifier. But maybe if you're out of 2nd level spell slots, it'd be worth considering. At level 8, we would be a Druid 2, and that means we get Wild Shape so that we could, twice per day, recovering 1 use of it with a short rest, transform into a beast of 1/4 challenge rating or lower with a bonus action that doesn't have a fly speed, right? This is really nice for exploration, for scouting, for utility, but we could also use a use of our Wild Shape for the Wild Companion feature, summoning a familiar via the Find Familiar spell that lasts until a long rest. And I kind of love the idea of having a familiar on this build, honestly. We're collecting quite the menagerie of pets here between this, our homunculus, and our cannon. Grab an owl and let them fly by and take the help action to give you 1 more chance at advantage without having to burn a luck point. Maybe the familiar could be even more useful later. Don't forget, we get 3rd level spell slots here as well, thanks to multiclassing. At level 9, we would be a Druid 3, and that means we get our Druid subclass. And honestly, I kind of want to just say PYF here, pick your favorite. None of the subclasses are super important or powerful for our purposes, unfortunately. My favorite ones all require a bonus action to do like their coolest thing, and we need that bonus action for our cannon, so I'd probably just go with Land Druid here. They get some really nice versatility in that they can, at the end of a long rest now, choose a type of land and then gain a bunch of new spells based on the land type that they pick. I'd probably default to Temperate here to grab the Misty Step spell, always useful, as well as Shocking Grasp and Sleep, a solid single target control option at any level now. But land druids also get the Land's Aid feature, which just lets them burn a use of wild shape and add an action to heal and harm creatures in a 10-foot radius sphere. 2d6 of healing or damage on a failed constitution save. It's not a ton, but hey, one more non-spell heal option if nothing else. I'll welcome that. Especially since I'm burning through those hit dice like paper. We also, though, get second level druid spells here, and this, of course, is the main reason why I even came druid in the first place, because while Healing Spirit, Hold Person, Pass Without Trace, Summon Beast, and more are all great to have, the one we care about most is, yep, Spike Growth. Oh, I can hear some of you complaining from here. Okay, so look, again, doing this is by no means necessary. If you would rather stay Artificer, you totally should, and you'll be fine. Get to those later features sooner, and eventually you could be pushing enemies into and through a wall of fire instead of web. That's cool. It wouldn't be a bad route to go at all. And you could use a different spell other than Spike Growth. You could use Moonbeam for what we're going to be doing here. But yeah, I want to make better use of all that pushing that we're doing, and for single target damage, yeah, I think we get more mileage out of Spike Growth than anything else. Plus, it's a decent control spell. And hey, I haven't done a cheese grater in over a year, so relax. For those who don't know, Spike Growth covers a 20-foot radius sphere, big area, 40 feet across, right? With thorns that's difficult terrain, so half movement if you're in there, and for every 5 feet someone travels inside the area, they take 2d4 damage, no save. Before we jump into the damage report, let me just mention, as I'm sure some of you have been thinking, that we could have gone Ranger here instead of Fighter and then Druid, right? It's worth considering. It might make more sense for your character concept, and you'd get the fighting style and the weapon masteries that I wanted from Fighter, plus eventually Spike Growth, plus some other cool things from a Ranger subclass, etc. I considered it. But ultimately decided I liked the Fighter then Druid route better. First, because it gave us a bump at the level 6 damage report with just a single level of Fighter, and again at this upcoming level 9 damage report with Spike Growth, which we wouldn't have been able to get going if we had gone Ranger until character level 10, right? Plus, we want something else from Fighter too in a sec, so yeah, this was just a slightly quicker route to get what I wanted. Go Ranger if you'd prefer. They get extra attack, that's nice, but don't forget that we can't extra attack with True Strike, right? We're not a Valor Bard or a Bladesinger. So we would need a high dexterity for that to be effective, and that's just a very different build. Okay, how about that damage report? Since last check, the main difference to our tactics is that now I'm going to assume that on round 1, we're casting Spike Growth in a much wider area than web, right? Around as many enemies as possible, and have our cannon, and later us, push our enemies back through the briar patch, causing them to take 2d4 damage for every 5 feet that they get pushed. Hopefully for us, that will be 15 feet for a total of 6d4 more damage. Oh, just imagine if we could do the I'm shooting Scorching Ray, but through my crossbow so that I get a +2 to hit, and I push them 10 feet for every ray that I hit them with. Oh, that would be gorgeous, wouldn't it? And I mean, hey, to be fair, the Warlock can totally do that without any special rules interpretations thanks to Eldritch Blast and Repelling Blast, right? Plus Grasp of Hadar if you can use it to drag them back towards you. This was like what I based my original Cheese Grater Sorlock build on all those years ago. I still don't think allowing this would be that OP. But more than that, I just love the idea of like pulling the trigger on my crossbow and just whoop, 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 multiple Scorching Ray blasts firing out of it instead of a crossbow bolt. You better believe that I am totally flavoring this character if I ever get to play them. Like, they've got this amazing, almost Inspector Gadget-like crossbow, right? Where they're like turning the dial to choose the effect they want and then pulling the trigger and bam, a big blob of webs shoots out from it. Or like turning the dial and a radiant bolt of True Strike energy flies out. Or like turn the dial and some spiked chains fly out to Thorn Whip and drag the enemy back through Spike Growth, etc., etc. Kind of like that weaponized arm that Jinx built for Savika in Arcane in Season 2, right? Where she like pulls the thing and the slot machine thing goes and then it changes her arm weapon to do something else cool. Anyways, yeah, since enemies are no longer going to be restrained, I will assume that we've got advantage on our attacks, thanks to our familiar helping out and our luck points, though we won't have enough for our homunculus to get advantage 2. Sorry, monkey. No advantage for you. It's okay. They weren't really doing much anyways. The nice thing about all of this, though, is that you could potentially have an enemy 15 feet or more into the briar patch, right? With a slow of 10 feet on them from your Frost Giant Goliath snare. And if they have 30 feet of speed, right? Pretty typical. Now it would be 20. And I mean, they're moving half speed in spike growth. They're not even going to be able to get out without dashing. And even then, they're going to take more damage as they wade through the brambles. I'd love to assume that they are doing that and add it to the numbers, but maybe they have a good ranged attack, or maybe they can teleport or something. More often than not, they probably will take additional damage, so good news, these numbers might be a little sandbagged. But if we average what we're doing over 4 rounds of combat, against a 10 armor class, we would do 54 damage per round here, and against a 16 AC, it would be 50 DPR. And that's still decent compared to other DPR builds that I've done to date at this level. That's maybe more like bottom half of tier 2, but still solid. And I mean, they don't have extra attack. There's no spells here adding damage to every hit we make or double sneak attack shenanigans. It's just me and a couple 3 pets making life miserable for our enemies who hate thorns and joyful for our friends with some utility, some backup support. It's good times. How does it look as we move into tier 3? Well, at level 10, I think the first thing we got to do is go Fighter 2, don't we? I mean, Action Surge, it's just right there. And it would mean that on round 1, we could lay down Spike Growth and make our True Strike, Frost Goliath, Arcane Firearm, Spell Adept Infused Crossbow push attack for big damage right away. I say we do it. But after that, at level 11, I think we go Druid 4 because we need every feat we can get. And that's what we get at Druid 4. Our intelligence is still only 18. We could bump it to 20 here, but I think I'd rather grab Spell Sniper instead. Maybe. It's a good feat. It would bump our intelligence to 19, let us ignore half and 3/4 cover when making spell attack rolls, which is nice if that comes up at our tables. Not everyone plays with cover much, I know. But most importantly, I think, potentially, it would let us not suffer disadvantage on spell attacks when an enemy is within 5 feet of us. This would be great for those times that an enemy is all up in our business and we want to push them away with our crossbow. That said, whether or not this would work with the attack we make as part of True Strike is questionable at best, right? Yes, we're casting a spell, but the wording of True Strike really seems to me to say that the attack we're making is actually a weapon attack, yeah? So talk it over with your DM, and if they say you'd need to have like crossbow expert feat instead of this to enjoy this, like you don't have disadvantage benefit, I'd probably grab something else, unless half and 3/4 cover come up a lot at your table. As for what else to take, Warcaster is a great option, but my first priority, and this might actually be a priority over Spell Sniper, would be, Coldcaster. Remember, this feat, new from Faerun, says that when we hit with an attack and deal cold damage, which we would be doing as a Frost Giant Goliath potentially, we lower the enemy's next save by a d4. And we're not necessarily trying to build around that. There's not a lot that we're doing that like we really want them to fail a save at, but there's plenty of things we could do if that were the case. And I'm sure that our allies would have plenty of things that they would like to do to them as well. You know, a -1d4 on the next saving throw is just kind of universally awesome. Plus you get the Ray of Frost cantrip and get to bump your intelligence. So anyways, I think Spell Sniper, Warcaster, and Coldcaster are kind of like the 3 priorities there. Depending on your table, talk it over with your DM, talk it over with your fellow players. Just make sure you get that intelligence to 19. Don't forget, at level 11 here, we get another bump to True Strike so that it does an extra 2d6 on a hit now. And we do get 4th level spell slots thanks to multiclassing Druid and Artificer. As a result, it's possible you might want to use a different spell for concentration now with 4th level spell slots. Spike Growth can be nice, but unfortunately it doesn't scale with upcasting. What's more, it can be problematic in that it can hurt your allies too, right? And if you have a melee ally who wants to attack someone in the middle of the Briar Patch, that can be problematic. So yeah, what about Moonbeam? As a 4th level spell, it would do 4d10 damage, radiant damage too, by the way, when you move it over someone or push them into it, right? They get to make a constitution save against it, but they take half damage on a save still. So if we assume a 50% chance to save, on average an enemy would take about 17 points of damage with Moonbeam compared to the 15 that we were getting from Spike Growth on average. Now, Moonbeam is not as big an area, and it doesn't slow enemies down, and it doesn't burn them again at the start of their turn like it used to, right? Back in the day, alas. It's if they end their turn in the area now, and they're probably going to do their level best to get out of it, and they're not snared by much, so they probably will. So yeah, doubling up on damage from things like Moonbeam, it's harder to do these days, but you can move it with an action if need be, and it's just less likely to hamper your allies. I am going to assume that we're switching to Moonbeam now for our concentration going forward. The damage is a teeny bit more. But know your options and use what's best for you. Anyways, at level 12, I think it's time to get back to Artificer. We have to at least get to Artificer 11 by the end of the build, don't we? We arguably should have beelined for it. So yes, that would make us Artificer 6, and that gives us magic item Tinkerer. Finally, this says that we can spend spell slots to recharge one of our created magic items that use charges, if we have a magic item like that, or we can convert a magic item into a spell slot, or once per day, change one magic item that we've created into a different magic item that we have plans for. Some nice versatility there. But then we also have a third magic item now, and we get some new plan options. As always, there's lots of great ones, but I would be sure to swap out that gleaming armor. I mean, we probably swapped that out a long time ago, but whatever we replaced it with, swap it out for +1 armor if you don't already have some, right? And then I'd for sure grab Mind Sharpener for my third item now, as it lets us just straight up succeed on a failed concentration check a few times a day, meaning we probably don't care as much about Warcaster after all at this point, right? Which is why I didn't prioritize it last level. Considering especially that we've got Constitution saving throw proficiency, yeah. Not that that makes us foolproof or anything, but we are kind of now, at least a few times a day. At level 13, we would be an Artificer 7, and that means we get Flash of Genius, which is such a great feature, speaking of saving throws, as it lets us intelligence modifier times per day use our reaction when we or an ally within 30 feet fail an ability check or a save to add our intelligence modifier to that roll, potentially causing it to succeed. It's like a little on-demand intelligence-based aura of protection. It's more limited in use, but still nice. But this then brings us to our next damage report. Since last check, we've gotten Action Surge to improve our round 1 damage and seen a little bump to our True Strike, but most of the rest of our improvements since last check have been in the realms of utility and defense, which is great. I guess we might see a teeny damage increase from Moonbeam too if we use it, but it's fairly inconsequential. Anyways, at this point, averaged over 4 rounds against enemies with a 10 AC, we would do 75 damage per round, and versus a 17 AC, it would be 70 DPR. And that's some decent scaling, and keeps us in a similar place as last time compared to other DPR builds to date, maybe bottom half of tier 2. Not terrible, and again, considering everything else we're bringing here, pretty fantastic, I'd say. So let's see what it looks like coming down the home stretch. At level 14, we would be an Artificer 8. That gets us another feat, and assuming we took a half feat last time, we're going to want to take another one here so that we can cap our intelligence at 20. Again, Warcaster, a little less appealing with the Mind Sharpener, but you might have long combat days and need all the help on concentration checks you can get, so I'd probably grab that if so. Or, sure, Coldcaster or Spell Sniper if you didn't get it last time. Fey Touched is worth considering, mostly to get silvery barbs if the mob isn't looking for you, or Shadow Touched, or anything else that looks good to you here and bumps your intelligence by 1. At level 15, we would be an Artificer 9. Finally, our cannon gets a buff. We get Explosive Cannon. It's our own fault for delaying it, but yeah, the temporary hit points given and the damage the cannon deals both increase by a d8 now with this feature. And then we can use a reaction to detonate it when it takes damage if we want, though doing so only forces a dexterity save to do 3d10 force damage in a 20-foot radius, which, I mean, it seems kind of silly to me. The flamethrower does 3d8 damage. This is 3 more damage on average, but then we don't have a cannon anymore. It was a bigger area, but I don't know. Seems like an odd choice to make in all but the rarest of circumstances. But we also get the much vaunted 3rd level spells that we surely waited way too long for. And while Blink and Catnap and Dispel Magic and Fly and Revivify and others are all great, artillerists get Wind Wall, situationally useful, and then Fireball for free. Calling in the big guns now. And so yes, of course, if you did want to lean more into the AoE aspect of this subclass, then you'd want to get here a lot sooner, no question, because Fireball's awesome, but I wanted to do something a little different with the Artillerist today, and I'm not sorry about it. We still have some AoE options if and when we need them, especially with the way that you can now, if you want, just move Moonbeam as an action, and it will do damage to every enemy you move it over on your turn, right? Might be almost as good as Fireball in some ways, and better in that you could do it every round with only using a single spell slot, right? Speaking of, don't forget that we get 5th level spell slots now for upcasting purposes, thanks to multiclassing. At level 15, we would be an Artificer 10, and that means we get Magic Item Adept, which just straight up lets us attune to 4 magic items instead of 3. It's hard to overestimate the power of that at most tables, and is just in time for the 4th magic item that we can now have made, right, as an Artificer, and the really greatly improved plans available at this level. If it were me, I'd probably pick up Cloak of Protection as my new item for a boost to my AC and my saving throws, and then I think I'd swap the repeating weapon for a +2 heavy crossbow, if you didn't already have something better anyways. Keep in mind, ignoring the loading and ammunition properties on crossbow that we get really from repeating weapon, right, is great if you're trying to make more than 1 attack per turn and or have a shield or something in one hand. But we don't, so we don't really need it, other than to keep from having to track our ammo, but I'm not so worried about that, especially at level 16. But then finally, for us, at level 17, we would be an Artificer 11, and that means we get the best Artificer class feature, right? The spell storing item, which lets us store up to 2 times our intelligence modifier. So 10 now, castings of any 1st, 2nd, or 3rd level Artificer spell, and then cast that spell from the item, whether we're doing that ourselves or we're giving the item to someone or something else, right? They can use their action to cast the spell, potentially let them concentrate even on the spell if the spell we stored requires concentration. So yeah, we could stick Cure Wounds in there like we did for that Guardian Tank 2.0 build, give it to our Homunculus and have them act as a battle medic heal bot. I kind of love that idea. Or sure, we could put a good concentration spell in there and have a Homunculus concentrate on it. But you know, Artillerists probably have the weakest selection of concentration spells out of all Artificers, I think. At least for 1st through 3rd spell level, right? They get Wall of Force eventually, which is amazing, but we went a different route. Well, okay, Alchemists kind of get the shaft too. But anyways, when it comes to the Artificer's spell storing item, as an Artillerist, I think the thing most people would probably want to do would be to, store Fireball in there and then just have our Homunculus start blasting with it, instead of making their paltry attack, right? But, I mean, how effective is that really going to be at your table? A couple of weeks ago, I did a poll on this very question, and the majority of you said that if a player tried that at your table, the Homunculus would probably be dead within a round or 2, if not before. And I get it. It's one thing if you have a little pet that's maybe like taking the help action to give advantage on a single attack, or like to do like 5-ish points of damage with an attack that they're making themselves. I mean, oftentimes even those pets still get taken out at a lot of tables, especially if the enemies have AoE options. But it's an entirely other thing if you have a little pet that's throwing out 8d6 damage in a 20-foot radius every round, right? Who only, by the way, has a 13 armor class and 15 hit points. I doubt most DMs and or enemies are just gonna smile and shake their head ruefully at that cute little critter and ignore them while the world erupts into a fiery inferno at their bidding, especially when they're so easy to take out potentially. That said, there are a lot of ways that you can potentially keep that little pet safe. Give them aid and temporary hit points. Have them get behind cover, whether that means they hide on your back, and they can be tiny after all, or like in a backpack or around a corner or just behind a rock. I have to believe that most battlefields would have something that a tiny creature could run into or behind most of the time. But of course, that might not necessarily protect them from AoE attacks. Then again, the homunculus anyway has evasion, and not every enemy has a solid AoE attack anyways. Most don't, actually. And they can fly. And heck, I don't know why we couldn't, if the homunculus went down, have our familiar swoop in, grab the spell storing item, and start firing in their stead, assuming they've survived. And Fireball can be cast from 120 feet away. Not every area we fight in is outside or has a 120-foot ceiling, but still. So yeah, how long they could actually survive is probably going to depend from table to table and from encounter to encounter, right? But there are definitely a lot of things we could do to help them stay up, even against enemies determined to bring them down. That said, I don't feel great about just assuming that a fireball slinging pet is just going to always stay alive round after round. So why don't we, as a compromise, say that we get 2 rounds of fireball off before they go down? And you know what? Since we're calculating for single target damage today, I'm just going to crunch numbers on 1 enemy. That means for a lot of you, a lot of the time, these numbers are going to be severely sandbagged. And I'm okay with that. Don't forget, True Strike gets its final bump here too, to do 3d6 extra damage when we hit with it. And this then brings us to our final damage report. Since last check, we have capped our intelligence, seen another True Strike bump, a little more damage from Moonbeam now if we decided to upcast it with a 5th level spell slot, right? A bump to our cannon damage, a little bump from our weapon, being a +2 weapon now, and probably above all, a couple rounds of fireball thrown in for good measure, which I will assume that the enemy is succeeding on their save against 50% of the time as usual. Though that does mean we've lost our little homunculus attack as well.
This is a good trade.
Other than that, as always, we've gained some nice survivability, utility, and potential support, but averaged now over a 4-round combat encounter against enemies with a 10 armor class, we would do 91 damage per round on average, and against an 18 AC, it would be 89 DPR. And that's still some decent scaling. We have slipped a little bit compared to other DPR builds to date, putting us more like top of tier 3, bottom of tier 2 at this level. Again, though, with the understanding that there's likely some additional damage that we're doing here to other targets. And if the homunculus can survive, or if your familiar can pick up the spell storing item and keep blasting, then we'd be above 100 damage per round on average, even to just a single enemy. And that's pretty awesome as an artillerist. So, shall we go over some final thoughts? I think we should. The tier score for this build, if you take the damage they do against every armor class that we calculate for at each of the 4 damage reports, average it into one big number, we get a 58. And that puts us right in the middle of the middle tier, tier 2. So yeah, just almost exactly average. But again, compared to other damage-focused builds, right? So yeah, I mean, when I first started writing the outline for this subclass, my initial plan was just to go for AoE damage. Flamethrower, Fireball, Dragon's Breath, it just feels like a no-brainer, right? But yeah, I started talking with the Dungeon Dudes and Treant Monk and Jeremy from Insight Check about the actual survivability of a fireball hurling homunculus, to say nothing of a familiar with the Dragon's Breath spell put on them, something I've been guilty of doing in the past. But to be fair, an owl has 60 feet of fly speed. I don't think it's totally unreasonable, but whatever. And I put that poll out, and I remembered that an AoE-focused artillerist was basically how I built my first artillerist, right? All those months and years ago. And I kind of went, let's do something different, right? And I mean, I love that we still have AoE options, regardless of, the fact that we built them for single target damage here. Heck, if the situation calls for it, we could always just pick up that spell storing item ourselves if the homunculus goes down and start throwing fireballs instead of making True Strike crossbow attacks, right? Single target damage is better with True Strike, especially if it lets you push them into a moonbeam or through spike growth. But if you've got multiple enemies lined up, fire away. And switch to the flamethrower with your cannon for that matter. Or of course, start throwing out temporary hit points to multiple party members. And therein lies the true beauty of this build and this subclass, I think. The wonderful versatility. Need AoE? I can do that. Need single target damage? I can keep up with all but the hardest hitting characters. Need support? I got heals, I got temporary hit points, I got a little bit of control. check, right? I hear a lot of people say that the artillerist is the second strongest artificer subclass, second only to the battlesmith. Yeah, I'll get there. And I don't think I agree. I'd actually probably put the armorer over all of them personally, but I love me a good tank. But if it is true that the artillerist deserves to be ranked among the best artificers, I think it's their fantastic versatility that puts them there, right? And yeah, I'd love to play one or have one as an ally, no doubt. But that's the build for the week. I hope you enjoyed it. I love you guys. Thank you so much for all that you do for me and for this channel. It really means the world to me. It really, really does. I hope you have a great day and a fantastic week, especially considering all of the challenges that we face in the world today, especially right now. Hang in there, okay? Find your people. Don't give up. Show a little more love. Please be kind. Do good. And I hope I'll see you again real soon. But until then, take care. Bye. The wide world spins and spits turmoil, and the nations toil. Peace, the pause of fear upon your chest. Only love can soothe that beast. And my words are paper tigers, no match for the predator of pain inside her. But I say love will come to you, hoping just because I spoke the words that they're true. As if I've offered up a crystal ball to look through. And where there's now one, there will be two. January 8th. Today, as I record this, felt like a fitting song for the world right now. My goodness. Oops. There we go. It's always messages from Knox, too. Hey Siri, put yourself in airplane mode. With this Marshall Wanged, as an artificer at one Tom Bomb, okay, I gotta say that even differently. D. Eldritch Clannon. Or using spell slots that, or using... I'm missing my water bottle. Where'd it go? You know, that puts, by contrast, brain. You know what I'm saying. But now I need to say it because it's bugging me. Gambling machine.